Hey guys, 3 years ago when I was a much younger man, I built this fold-up assembly table in my garage, and today we're going to be upgrading it. We're going to take a look at the design, and what we're going to be doing is adding some finish to the tabletop finally. We're going to take it apart so that we can cut into it and make it much lighter. We're going to fix a leg that's been wobbly, and then while we're at it, we're going to add some T-track so that we can have some more accessories. So go ahead and stay tuned, and let's see if we can't save my lower back. Now, one of the great things about having a table like this is that you can put really big projects on it. And what's great about it is you can move it around the shop. And this is great, especially if you have a small shop. And when you don't need it, you can go ahead and fold it up against the wall and still be able to park a car inside the garage. So it's a great compromise between strength of the table and flexibility of it.
All right, now we're going to be separating out our tabletop. It's in two different pieces. We have the top layer and the bottom layer, and they're held together by about 30 screws if I remember correctly. So I'm going to be using a drill to take them out, otherwise we're going to be here all day. And one of the things I recommend when you're doing something like this is one of these magnetic bowls. And the good thing about these bowls is you can put all your screws in there and they'll hold it in place, and you don't have to worry about them rolling off the table and ending up on the floor, or even worse, in your car tires. That can get really expensive really quickly. I'm going to go ahead and link this and all the major things that I'm using in the video description.
So as I work my way around the table, taking out all the screws, one of the things that I do recommend is that you label these parts. So right here, I'm labeling the bottom left and the top left. That way, after we take off the tabletop, if we accidentally flip it around, when we go to put it back on, we don't have any issues because I've already marked where it needs to go. So now that we have everything marked and the screws are off, we're going to go ahead and slide off the top piece. Remember, the top piece is 3/4 inch plywood and that bottom piece is 1/2 inch plywood. So we're going to put it up against the wall because we don't need it right now. And we're going to take a quick water break.
What we can now do is we can leave the right side as is, but we can take this whole left section in the middle right here and we can cut a hole. That way we get rid of that material and we make the table lighter.
So before we cut into the table, I just want to make sure that we're not going to be cutting into anything critical. So I'm going to drill a hole here and check underneath to make sure we're not running into the apron or a screw. And we're not. So now we're going to grab our T-square and we're going to start to mark the outline for the piece of plywood that we're going to be removing. We're going to indicate that with this tape.
All right, just to give you guys a better visualization here, we have this blue X that we've marked out and this box in the outline. Everything inside this box is going to get cut. Now, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it is. Also, this is about 37 cents worth of painter's tape that I just wasted to give you this better visualization. If that doesn't deserve a like or subscribe, then I don't know what does. But let's keep going.
All joking aside, thank you guys so much for watching my videos. So for simplicity, we're going to call this the horizontal cut, and we're going to be using the track saw to make this horizontal cut because it's very easy to use the plunge feature, and it's going to be a lot straighter than using any other tool. And then we're going to call this the vertical cut. So we're going to move our track over, and then what we're going to do is clamp that down so it doesn't move. And then we're going to be using some painter's tape to use as a visual stop so that I know when to stop the track saw. Because we're not going to be cutting all 4 corners, we're going to cut as much as this rectangle as possible. Now we can take off that track, and then with our jigsaw, we can try to cut the corners even closer, and it's a lot less straight of a cut, but it's a lot more versatile when it comes to getting to the corner. And to prevent this piece from falling on my feet when it's done, we're going to go ahead and clamp that down, and then we're going to come back with the jigsaw and make our final cuts. And then use the flush trim saw to get one last corner that I can't make with the jigsaw. Then we're going to go ahead and unclamp it. And you can see here with those blocks, it prevented the piece from falling. And now we can remove that side of the table. And while I was cutting that side of the table, I kind of figured, well, we're already cutting one piece, so why not cut the other side that we don't need? So we're going to take that piece off as well. We're going to repeat the process with the track saw, and then we're going to come through with the jigsaw again. And then we're going to finish it up with a flush trim saw. And here we pop that piece out. And now you can see so much of the table has been taken out, but this is exactly what we want. It's definitely necessary to make this thing lighter. And that's one of the upgrades that we wanted to make that we talked about in the beginning of the video. And you can see here as I squeeze in to give you an idea of how big that hole is. And then here is our next piece that we're going to be modifying, which is that crossbar on the bottom. So we're going to go ahead and take that out. The middle part is not really necessary. It's just a lot of wasted mass. And then we're going to go ahead and mark it with our tape measure so that we can take out the middle piece. And we're going to use our T-track as a straight edge because it's the only thing that I have close and I didn't want to walk to the other side of the garage. Then we're going to be using our jigsaw to cut out the bigger portion of the middle part. And then we're going to wrap it with some painter's tape so that it doesn't fall. It's the same thing we did with the blocks. Then we're going to take off the painter's tape and then continue to cut the other side using our flush trim saw. So this saw comes in handy quite a bit for things like this. Then off camera, we're going to sand the piece down, and here you can see a close-up of what it looks like after we've cut it and sanded it. So it's not the most beautiful thing in the world, but it definitely works. And then here you could see us put it back on the bottom. And so far, after a few weeks of using it, it works just as good as it did when it had all that extra material in the middle. So the fact that we can get rid of that and it still functions the same is a win in my book. Now our second upgrade is complete. So for our third upgrade, we're going to need to go ahead and flip the table over and fix that wobbly leg that's been like that for the last few months. And when lifting or moving heavy things like this, you really want to make sure that you take your time and think about how you're going to move it.
All right, so now that we have the table upside down, it's on the floor, so we have a nice level surface to work on. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be tightening all 4 of these legs so that we can make sure that when we put everything back together that these are nice and sturdy. But for one of these legs, we're going to be taking it off completely. I'm going to see why it's not rotating as well. And then what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move the camera so you could see a close-up of how exactly I installed these legs. So let's go ahead and continue on. All right, so as you can see here, we have a jam nut. So we have 2 nuts. I believe these are 9/16. I actually don't remember, but you have 2 nuts here. Then you have a washer. Then you have this bolt that's going through the middle. And then I believe on the inside you have EMT conduit inside the leg. And then in between the leg and the apron, you should have another one of these washers. And then on the back side, you should also have another washer. So let's see. So there's one jam nut. And here's another one. And then you could see we take off this big flat washer. And then we can now pull out the bolt. And on the other side, you have this other washer. So now we should be able to take this leg right here, and we should be able to hit it with our mallet so that we can slide it off of the EMT conduit. You could see that we took the leg off, and here you go. So the leg appears to be fine. I don't see much, if any, issue with it. So we're just going to put it off to the side. You slide it through. So I'm going to try putting the leg back on, seeing why it's not rotating correctly, and then go ahead and tighten up the legs.
One of the things that you want to make sure you do is always lubricate these legs because they will seize up on you, and that's all we're doing here. Then we're going to be putting our bolt back on, then our washer, then the nut.
All right, the main thing is you don't want to torque this too tight, just enough for it to be a little resistant on the leg, and then you put the jam nut in. Now, the good thing about this is you can make this as loose or as tight as you want, but one of the ways I prevent the legs from falling down accidentally when it's on the wall is I make it tight where I actually have to pull them quite a bit, maybe at least at about 10 pounds of pull for the legs to move. So I like to add a little bit of resistance, and that ensures that when I walk by the table or if there's a car parked next to the table, I don't have to worry about the legs falling down. That's probably one of the biggest comments I've gotten on this is, how do you prevent the legs from falling? The legs are going to fall on you. No, the legs actually require quite a bit of force in order to move. So that all has to do with what we do here. Okay, still a little loose for my taste. So I'm going to tighten the nut a little bit more, keep adjusting it until we get a nice, smooth, and a little bit of resistance on that leg. Because right now I can tell if I let it go, it's going to fall. And what I want to be able to do is when I let it go, for it not to fall, for it to hold its place. Now let's see what happens. So we have the leg all the way up. As you could see, now when we turn, it holds its position. Now it holds, even in this case right here, where it's probably at its, heaviest. There, you could see it still holds it all the way down. And so this is going to be perfect when we put it back up on the wall. Again, you can walk underneath this all day long, and this leg's not going to flip out. As long as you remember to check these jam nuts every few months or so, you should be okay. All right, let's continue on.
Since we're down on the ground, we might as well work our way through the other legs and tighten those. So I'm going to go to the other 3 legs and perform the same operation to make sure that it can hold its weight. And then we're going to go ahead and lock it back up with the toggle clamp. And then we're going to put back on our crossbar that we just cut and lift the table back over. And we can call our 3rd upgrade complete. And now we're going to be putting on our tabletop. And then we're going to put back our first screw back into its hole, which is why we labeled it. And then we're going to work our way back around the table with those screws. And if you're wondering what we're going to be using for our next upgrade, we're going to be using this T-Track from Rockler. And we're going to be using this intersection kit from PowerTech. The reason why we're using intersection kit from PowerTech is because it was cheaper than the one at Rockler, and we just wanted standard budget. So they won't match exactly, but it doesn't matter to me. And then we're going to be using this piece of walnut for a future project that we have as our guide for our router. And then we made this jig on the left-hand side so that we could place our guide in the right location. Now, I've never done anything like this, so we're going to be using our router to go through and cut our dados for our T-Track. Here I tried using a block so that I wouldn't have tear out, but it didn't work. So I just continued to chisel it out. And then here you could see me putting in my first piece of T-Track. And I was amazed that it worked because I did not expect it to do that. And then here on the left-hand side, we're going to be adding our second dado, really just taking off a 1/8 of an inch of depth at a time until we cut everything for our T-Track. And then now we're going to do that cross cut here for our third dado, and you can see that the T-Track fits fine. And you want the T-Track to sit slightly below the tabletop surface. That way, when you run a piece of lumber across the tabletop, it doesn't hit the T-Track. And now that we've cut our dados, it's time to figure out how we're going to cut our T-Track. And I had every intention on using my miter saw in order to do that since it's aluminum and you can cut that with a miter saw blade. But last time I cut something on this miter saw other than lumber, I experienced kickback. So I decided not to go with that. And instead, I wanted to use my jigsaw. So I spent a little bit of time making a jigsaw jig so that I can cut my T-Track. And I used this spare piece of plywood for the jig itself. On the left side was my first attempt at a dado, which does not look good, but on the right side was my second attempt. So here's how this works. You take the T-Track and you slide it into the dado, and then you can go ahead and put this piece of backer board on it, and then you can cut it using a metal blade in your jigsaw. And so that acts as a fence on the left side. Then you can take off the wedges, and then here you have your piece cut. So it's a lot safer, and I didn't have to worry so much about kickback, and I just filed it down. So now I have to make about 20 of these cuts or so. So I'm going to do that off camera. But here you can see with this intersection kit when we slide that in. And then we go ahead and put in the piece that we just cut. And it's a nice snug fit. And then we're going to use this Vex bit, which finds the center of the countersink. And then we're going to be putting in our screws. And then we're just going to work that through all the dados that we cut. And here's this side of the table in a different angle. And then I recommend using this piece of lumber to get it seated flush for the intersect kit or the T-Track. And then same thing with that Vex bit. And then we're going to go ahead and put our screws in. Now that all our T-Track is in, we went ahead and took it out. And then we're going to water pop the table so that we can raise the grain and sand it down. Now I know I'm using a Festool sander here, but this is a great way to learn how to use it, as I'm still trying to understand how to best hold it for long periods of time. And after you finish sanding that down with 120 grit sandpaper, you can go ahead and grab a lint-free dust rag and take off all of the excess sawdust so that the excess sawdust doesn't mess up your finish. Now for our top coat, we're going to be using General Finish High Performance Satin, and this can has seen better days, but I have it left over from a number of projects. And we're just going to be going through with a foam brush and applying 3 coats and just taking our time and sanding in between each of the coats with 220 grit sandpaper. And this is exactly how the table looks after we put back in the T-track and we've applied the finish. Now, not bad for a tabletop that's already been used for a few years. It's going to be a lot easier to use now that we can use some of our hold down clamps and some of our other hold down accessories to keep our pieces in place. So I can't wait to try them out, and you'll be seeing them on the channel in the future. Now, I guess the only question that we still haven't answered is this table substantially easier to lift than when we started working on it. And so the only way to truly test it out is to go through the motion and put the table away to see if it is lighter.
Wow, so I didn't think it was going to work when we first started the video, but this workbench is definitely lighter than it was. It seems like the upgrades have worked, which I'm pretty happy about. I don't know by how much lighter it is, but it doesn't matter. I feel like I can lift this thing now with just one arm. I'm still going to use 2, but it's lighter there, and then my lower back thanks me a lot. So I'm just happy with it. I don't know what else to say. I'm probably still going to try to reduce some more weight in the future, but for now, this is perfectly fine. Alright guys, those are all the upgrades that we're going to be doing for now for the Foldup assembly table. I want to use it on some future builds I got coming up, like an entryway table and a DIY coffee table. And if you don't want to miss out on those builds because they're going to be dope, go ahead and hit the like and subscribe button so that you could be alerted as soon as those videos come out. As always, I'm Neil, and I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.